The top 10% of Americans by net worth, roughly 13 million households, collectively own 87% of all stocks in this country. That's $44 trillion in equities, according to the Federal Reserve's most recent distributional data, a figure that hit a new all-time high in the fourth quarter of 2025. Not real estate, not private business equity, just stocks. And behind that $44 trillion, there is a behavioral pattern so consistent and so mechanical that once you see the monthly numbers driving it, you'll realize the wealth gap isn't a mystery at all. It's arithmetic. The household saving rate across all Americans sits at roughly 4 to 4.5% right now, according to the Bureau of Economic Analysis. 4% of the US median household income of $83,730 works out to about $279 a month. Put that in an index fund for 30 years at historical market rates, and you end up with a little over $630,000. Not nothing, but not freedom either. The threshold to be in the top 10% of household incomes in the United States was $234,769 in 2024. A household at that income level, investing 20% of gross, which the diligent members of this bracket actually do, is deploying $3,917 every single month. Over 30 years, same market, same index fund, roughly $8.9 million. $279 versus $3,917 per month. $630,000 versus $8.9 million in terminal wealth. That is not a statistical abstraction. That is two completely different financial realities being assembled right now in parallel by people living in the same country, watching the same TV shows, stuck in the same highway traffic. Here's what I'm going to show you in the next 20 minutes. The gap you just heard is not primarily an income story. It's a behavioral story, specifically a story about what percentage of income gets redirected to a wealth machine versus consumed by a lifestyle furnace. And the most disturbing part of that story is buried inside the top 10% itself, where a significant fraction of high earners are running the same 4% savings rate as the median American, despite earning 3 times the median income. That internal contradiction is where the real insight lives. And it's what makes this whole thing more interesting and more actionable than a simple "rich people save more" headline. Think of every person's financial life as running 2 machines. The first is the income machine, your salary, your business, your consulting fees, whatever converts your time and skill into cash. Most people spend enormous energy optimizing the income machine. They negotiate raises, switch companies, pursue certifications, start side businesses. They think the path to financial freedom runs entirely through the income machine. The second machine is the wealth machine. It doesn't care how many hours you worked last week. It doesn't respond to performance reviews. It runs on exactly one input, capital that you feed it every month. Then it compounds that capital silently around the clock, whether you're paying attention or not. The wealth machine's output grows geometrically over time, meaning the longer it runs, the faster it grows, and the last 10 years of a 30-year run produce more than the first 20 years combined. The mistake that destroys most people's financial trajectory, including, as I'll show you shortly, a frankly embarrassing percentage of 6-figure earners, is assuming that upgrading the income machine automatically upgrades the wealth machine. It doesn't. The wealth machine runs only if you feed it. And the top 10% accumulators, the ones who actually end up with $8, $9, $10 million portfolios on normal professional salaries, feed it at a radically higher rate than everyone else. Remember the 2 machines. They explain everything weird and counterintuitive in this data. In a few minutes, I'm going to show you a number that breaks the high earners feel financially stressed narrative in the most uncomfortable possible way. But first, let me lay out the actual raw numbers so you have a foundation. In 2025, the threshold to be in the top 10% of individual earners was $155,042. At the household level 2 incomes combined, the US Census Bureau's most recent data puts the household income at the 90th percentile at $251,000. Let's call it $250,000 and change, because the rounding doesn't affect the conclusion. Now, someone earning $250,000 a year after federal taxes is taking home somewhere around $165,000 to $170,000 annually. That's roughly $13,700 to $14,167 a month in actual take-home pay. Among the top 1%, the average savings rate is 38%. For the remainder of the top 10%, those in the 90th to 99th percentile, the average savings rate is 12%. And among the bottom 90%, the rate is 4%. 12% of $250,000 gross income is $30,000 per year. That's $2,500 per month into the wealth machine. It doesn't sound dramatic. It's less than most people in New York City pay for a one-bedroom apartment. But run it at 10% annual return for 30 years, and you land at about $5.7 million from monthly contributions that feel from the outside completely unremarkable. Research found that 42% of high net worth individuals describe themselves as highly diligent planners who have a system and do not deviate from it. Among the general population, only 20% said the same. This is not a small gap. These are people who've automated the wealth machine and stopped having monthly negotiations with themselves about whether to fund it. And the savings rate of that diligent subgroup skews much higher than 12%. Think 20 to 25% of gross income. At $250,000, 20% saved is $50,000 per year, $4,167 a month. Over 30 years at 10%, about $9.4 million. At 25% of gross, $5,208 a month. After 30 years, $10.5 million. That is the scary number in the title of this video. Not scary because it's unreachable, scary because it's mechanical. It requires no stock-picking genius, no inheritance, no startup moonshot. It requires a savings rate and time, two things that are entirely behavioral. By the way, hit subscribe if you like the content. Otherwise, YouTube's algorithm may never show you my videos again. Now, here's where the compounding amplifier makes this genuinely disturbing. In a few minutes, I'm going to show you the most counterintuitive version of this story, the one hiding inside the top 10% itself. But first, let me show you what the gap looks like in terminal wealth terms, because the input gap and the output gap are very different animals. If you invested $1,000 every single month from January of 1994 through December of 2023 in a savings account, you'd have $360,000. If you invested that same $1,000 a month into the S&P 500 every month instead, your money would have grown to $1,964,356. Let that sink in for a moment. Same monthly input. Savings account versus index fund. $360,000 versus $1.96 million. The market rate multiplied the outcome by 5.4 times. That is what consistent, boring, mechanical market exposure does to a regular monthly contribution over 3 decades. Now, scale the monthly contribution to top 10% levels. $2,500 per month, 30 years, 10%, $5.7 million. $4,000 per month, $9 million. $5,000 per month, $11.3 million. The trajectory isn't surprising given the inputs, but most people have never actually run these numbers on realistic salary levels. They think about compounding in the abstract, nod thoughtfully, and then go lease a nicer car. Here is the comparison that actually matters. The median American household, saving at 4% of income, deploys about $279 per month. Over 30 years, that produces $630,000. A top 10% household saving at 20% of income deploys $3,917 per month. Over 30 years, that produces $8.9 million. The income difference between these two households is roughly 3 times. The terminal wealth difference is 14 times. The gap didn't scale with income. It was amplified by the savings rate differential, and then amplified again by compounding over 3 decades. Regular Americans took 3.5 times as long as the top 10% to recoup their losses after the 2008 recession. People tell that story like it's a market access story. It's a capital deployment story. When equities crashed in 2008, the top 10% had enormous equity positions that fell and then recovered along with the market. Regular households had almost nothing in equities, so they had nothing to recover through market appreciation. They had to rebuild through earned income alone, dollar by dollar, while the wealth machine of the top 10 reloaded automatically, accelerating through the recovery. The gap between them didn't just survive the crash, it widened through it. Now I want to introduce you to someone. His name, for our purposes, is Marcus. He's 38 years old, a senior engineering manager at a mid-sized tech company in Austin, Texas. He earns $240,000 per year. His wife earns $65,000 as a teacher. Household income, $305,000. That puts them solidly in the top 8 or 9% nationally. Marcus maxes out his 401k every year, $23,500, the 2026 limit. He feels financially responsible. He tells people he invests. He's not wrong. But here is what the math says. $23,500 divided by $305,000 gross income is a savings rate of 7.7%, below the bracket average of 12, well below the discipline tiers 20 to 25. His wife contributes to her retirement account as well, say another $8,000. Combined household retirement savings, $31,500 per year, about 10.3% of gross. Outside of that, Marcus's monthly cash flow looks like this. Mortgage on a 4-bedroom house in a good school district, $4,200. BMW 5 Series lease, $920. Private school for 2 kids, $4,000. Groceries and dining out, $2,300. Vacations, 2 international trips per year, spread across 12 months, $1,700. Various subscriptions, gym memberships, Amazon Prime habits, $600. Insurance, utilities, everything else, $2,000. That's roughly $16,720 in monthly fixed and semi-fixed costs. Take home on $305,000 gross is about $18,500 a month after all taxes. Marcus is left with about $1,780 per month of discretionary breathing room, which in practice gets absorbed by the birthday party, the home office chair upgrade, the kids' sports equipment, the spontaneous weekend trip. His actual monthly investment outside the 401k is approximately zero, some months negative. Marcus is not stupid. Marcus is not reckless. Marcus reads finance articles. He knows about index funds. But Marcus is running one machine at full throttle and feeding the second machine just enough to technically say he invests. Hold Marcus in mind. He comes back at the end. This is where it gets really interesting because Marcus is not an outlier inside the top 10. The Bank of America research from 2024 found that around 20% of households bringing in more than $150,000 per year were living paycheck to paycheck. 20%. Not missing payments, not struggling to eat, earning $150,000 plus and still spending to the edge of their income every month. Research also suggests that more than half of high earners with annual salaries exceeding $300,000 struggle with credit card debt. A 2024 survey by BHE Financial showed that 62% of these higher earners carried credit card debt, due in part to lifestyle creep and increased financial obligations. There is a term for this demographic: Henrys, high earners, not rich, yet. Data from 2024 shows that the average Henry household spends around $68,000 annually on non-essentials like travel, shopping, premium services, and experiences. $68,000 on non-essentials. That's more than most American households earn in total. Every step up the income ladder seems to bring new costs and obligations. Promotions, job changes, or moving into a new income bracket are often followed by bigger homes, private school tuition, luxury cars, upgraded vacations, and more frequent dining out. Social circles change too, and with them, expectations about what normal looks like. This is the lifestyle furnace, and it is the single most efficient wealth-destroying mechanism available to a high-income American. Not bad investments, not market crashes. The lifestyle furnace, because the lifestyle furnace doesn't just consume current income, it creates fixed obligations that grow with every promotion and compound into a standard of living that becomes increasingly expensive to maintain and increasingly difficult to exit. The conventional wisdom says, if I earn more, I'd invest more. The data says, For roughly 60% of people in the upper income brackets, more income produces more lifestyle spending at an approximately proportional rate. The behavioral research on this is consistent across multiple data sets and decades. Income growth without a deliberate savings rate commitment produces lifestyle expansion, not wealth machine expansion. Here is the specific reversal I want to land. You think the problem is income. The actual problem is the allocation ratio. How much of your income goes to the wealth machine versus the lifestyle furnace? And the ratio is controllable in a way that the income is not. Knowing these numbers and actually building a structured system around them are two very different things. I had access to versions of this data 5 or 6 years ago. I understood the math. I ran the compounding calculations. And it still took deliberate architecture, not willpower, architecture to actually make the deployment consistent and automatic. That's what I built the exit code around. It's a digital book built on 50 years of actual retirement and wealth accumulation data, not motivational content, not broad financial advice, but a mathematical framework that takes the concepts I'm describing in this video and translates them into a specific number you should be investing monthly, a specific timeline, and a specific answer to the question of when your wealth machine is large enough to permanently replace your income machine. Given what we've been discussing, the savings rate gap, the compounding amplifier, the behavioral architecture, 2 sections of the exit code are directly relevant right now. One is the analysis of the 4% trap. Why the withdrawal rule most people still use is structurally broken under real 50-year return sequences, and what the dynamic withdrawal method looks like as a replacement. The second is what I call the lazy portfolio, an allocation methodology that has historically outperformed active traders over 30-year windows while requiring about 45 minutes of attention per year. That second part is why the channel is called Lazy Investor. It costs less than dinner out for 2 people through the link in the description. And every year you delay building an actual framework around these numbers costs you more in foregone compounding than the book costs. The math is indifferent to your intentions. Now, let me get to the part of this that almost never gets discussed in the wealth inequality conversation. The actual behavioral architecture that creates the divergence. Because the question isn't why wealthy people invest more money. That's circular. The question is, what behavioral mechanism produces the sustained higher savings rate over decades? Because if it were just willpower, the data on high earners and lifestyle inflation wouldn't look the way it does. There is a concept in behavioral economics called the commitment device. A commitment device is a structure you build in advance, specifically to remove future decisions. The most powerful financial commitment device ever built for ordinary investors is automatic investment before the money touches your primary checking account. Not, I'll invest what's left over. Leftover money is always zero. There is always somewhere for surplus cash to go. A weekend trip, a kitchen renovation, a car upgrade, an appliance that breaks. The wealth machine doesn't get funded on willpower. Willpower is a finite resource that depletes across the day. The wealth machine gets funded by removing the decision entirely. 42% of high net worth individuals describe themselves as highly diligent planners who have a system and do not deviate from it. Among the general population, only 20% said the same. Translate that out of survey language. Nearly half of the people who actually end up with 8-figure portfolios on professional salaries have made the funding of their wealth machine a non-negotiable automatic event. It isn't a choice they make every month. It moves. They don't interact with it. They review it quarterly. Otherwise, it runs. There's a second mechanism that the behavioral literature identifies, and it's one I've observed personally over more than a decade of running my own business and having money actually invested. Once a portfolio reaches a certain scale, and people describe different thresholds, but it's often somewhere between $200,000 and $500,000. The psychological return from watching it compound begins to compete with the psychological return from spending. The portfolio becomes a score in a game you're clearly winning. Touching the principal starts to feel wrong in a visceral way, not from discipline, from aversion, from the same cognitive bias that makes people reluctant to sell a stock they've held for years at a gain, just writ large. This shift doesn't happen at zero. It doesn't happen at 30,000. It happens after sustained exposure to a growing portfolio over years. And this is why the early years of consistent investment are the hardest psychologically, because the wealth machine hasn't grown large enough yet to provide its own psychological reward. The lifestyle furnace provides instant gratification. The wealth machine provides delayed gratification for years before it starts providing its own psychological pull. Getting through that gap requires architecture, not character. Some millionaires save as little as 20%, while others are much more aggressive. Savings rates among millionaires seem to average more than 30%, with some at 50% or higher. And the variation in those rates, according to the same research, tracks almost entirely with the desired timeline for financial independence. The ones who want to exit the income machine at 45 save at 50%. The ones who are content to exit at 65 save at 20 to 25%. The exit date is a savings rate decision, not a market timing decision. Here is a parable that circulates in actuarial adjacent circles that I think is the cleanest illustration of this dynamic. Two farmers, same size field, same soil quality, same market access. Farmer 1, every harvest, plants back as much seed corn as he can survive without. He lives lean on the margins of the crop. He is not hungry, but he is not comfortable either. After 20 years, his field has expanded year over year. His storehouse is overflowing. His neighbors buy from him. He's built something that runs without him. Farmer 2 enjoys the harvest. He eats well. He has a nice barn. He takes winters off. After 20 years, his field is the same size it was. He hasn't starved, but he hasn't built anything either. Every harvest, he depends on the next harvest. He cannot stop farming. The seed corn in this parable is not income. The seed corn is the fraction of income that doesn't get consumed. The lifestyle furnace is not evil, it's just Farmer 2's winter vacation. And the wealth machine is not magic, it's Farmer 1's expanded field. The mechanics are not complicated. The behavior is the whole game. Let me build this out as a concrete case study with real numbers, because percentages can feel like someone else's situation. Two households, both in Dallas, Texas in 2026. Both earn $235,000 per year gross household income. Both are 40 years old. Both have children in public school. Both max their 401ks. Beyond those similarities, they made one different decision about where the rest of their money goes. The Garcias saved 22% of gross income total. That includes the 401k and a taxable brokerage account that they fund automatically the day their paychecks clear. Their combined monthly investment across all vehicles is $4,310. They drive reliable 3-year-old cars. They bought outright. They vacation domestically most years, one international trip every other year. Their house is comfortable but not a statement. Their neighbors, who know they earn well, sometimes wonder why they seem so relaxed about money. The Mitchells save 8% of gross income. They max the 401k. That's their entire investment program. Everything beyond the 401k funds the lifestyle. The house is nicer. 2 new cars on leases. 1 European family trip per year. Private school starting at middle school. Monthly investment, the 401k contribution only, which works out to about $1,958 per month on a household basis. No additional brokerage account. 25 years later, both are 65. The Garcias portfolio, $4,310 a month for 25 years at 10% annualized. Terminal value, approximately $5.7 million. At 4% annual withdrawal, that generates $228,000 per year in retirement income indefinitely. Their wealth machine is now larger than their income machine ever was. They have crossed the line. The Mitchells portfolio, $1,958 a month for 25 years at 10%. Terminal value, approximately $2.6 million. At 4% withdrawal, $104,000 per year. Their current lifestyle costs them closer to $200,000 per year. They have a gap. To close it, they have to draw down principal faster than the portfolio replenishes itself through returns. A $2.6 million portfolio withdrawing at the rate the Mitchells need begins to deplete meaningfully within 15 to 18 years. They have a retirement that works until it doesn't. Same income, same market, same starting age. The Garcias are free, the Mitchells are constrained. The difference between them is 14 percentage points of savings rate over 25 years. That's the entire story. The Mitchells, by the way, have a beautiful kitchen. Imported marble countertops, custom cabinetry, a range that belongs in a restaurant. It's genuinely stunning. The contractor who installed the countertops runs a modest brokerage account he started on his phone during a slow week on a job site. He invests $350 a month. He doesn't have marble countertops. In 30 years, I would trade the marble for his account without a second of hesitation. The marble has a net present value of 0 in 20 years. The account compounds. Now let me close the loop on Marcus. 38 years old, $305,000 household income, 7.7% gross savings rate, BMW on a lease, private school, European vacations. If Marcus maintains his current trajectory, roughly $23,500 per year in combined household retirement savings, and earns 10% annualized in a standard market index fund, he ends up at 65 with approximately $3.1 million. At 4% withdrawal, that generates $124,000 per year. His current lifestyle costs him roughly $200,000 per year, and that number will likely be higher in retirement as healthcare costs increase. Marcus has a retirement that feels tight before it even starts. Here is what happens if Marcus makes one structural change at 38. He raises his total household savings rate from 7.7 to 20% of gross. He automates the additional 12.3%, which is roughly $37,500 per year, to a Roth IRA and a taxable brokerage account. He returns the BMW and buys a 3-year-old Camry outright. He pulls the kids from private middle school and invests the difference. He doesn't stop going to Europe, he goes every 3rd year instead of every year. These aren't dramatic lifestyle sacrifices, but they redirect $3,125 per month from the lifestyle furnace to the wealth machine. Over 27 years at 10%, that additional capital produces approximately $5.4 million in additional portfolio value. Marcus's total portfolio at 65, $8.5 million. Annual withdrawal at 4%, $340,000. That is not a tight retirement. That is a wealth machine that outlasts him, produces generational carry, and never once required him to pick a stock, time the market, or bet on a startup. The only thing Marcus needs to do at 38 is build the commitment device before his brain talks him into a kitchen renovation. Now, 3 takeaways, and I mean specifically calibrated to this topic, not generic personal finance. First, your savings rate is a ratio, not a dollar amount. If your income increases and your savings dollar amount stays the same, your savings rate decreased. That is not wealth building behavior. That is lifestyle furnace expansion with a delay. Lock the percentage. As your income machine grows, the wealth machine must grow at the same ratio or higher. Anything less is a real, compounding, irreversible cost that you won't feel for 10 years and won't be able to fix in 20. Second, calculate your actual monthly gap. Not the vague gap, the specific gap. If you want $4 million in today's real terms at age 65 and you're 40 today, you need roughly $4,000 per month at 10% annual return. How much are you currently investing per month across all vehicles? The difference between those two numbers is the size of the problem you are currently ignoring. Solve for the gap, not the market, not the fund selection. The gap. Third, automate before the lifestyle furnace negotiates. Money that does not appear in your primary checking account is not available for the lifestyle furnace to consume. This is not a hack. This is the removal of friction in the right direction. Set up automatic transfers from your paycheck or checking account to your brokerage and retirement vehicles on the day income arrives. Not at the end of the month, not quarterly, the day it arrives. The behavioral research on this is unambiguous. People spend what's available and invest what's committed. Make the commitment before the availability. The wealthiest 1% hold 50% of stocks worth $29 trillion as of the 4th quarter of 2025, according to the Federal Reserve. The top 10% holds 87% of stocks valued at $44 trillion. The bottom 50% of Americans by net worth own only 1% of stocks worth roughly $620 billion. That concentration is not an accident of policy or luck. It is the arithmetic output of a savings rate differential maintained over decades, compounded by a market that rewards patience and penalizes impatience, and reinforced by a commitment device architecture that keeps the wealth machine funded, regardless of what the lifestyle furnace demands in any given month. The top 10% does not have a different market, they have a different ratio. Lazy investing built more fortune than crypto memes. And the people running the wealth machine quietly in the background while everyone else argues about which income machine to upgrade already know that. Sources referenced: Federal Reserve Distributional Financial Accounts, Q4 2025, Bureau of Economic Analysis Personal Savings Rate Data, U.S. Census Bureau Household Income Data 2024, DQYDJ Analysis of SSA Earnings Records 2025, ETF Trends, BLS Savings Rate by Income Class Analysis, Bank of America 2024 Research on High-Income Paycheck-to-Paycheck Households, BHG Financial 2024 Survey, Financial Planning Association Research on High Net Worth Investment Behavior 2025, Statista Federal Reserve Wealth Share Data, Q3 2025, S&P 500 Historical Return Data per Troutwood and Bank